Okay. I was having some issues with my Anime Expo blog. Sadly, I couldn't figure out what. I tried so many things. And as a result, I sadly won't be posting an Anime Expo blog this year, which, could be a good thing. So I'm gonna view it as a good thing. But yeah, this video will be up in place of my Anime Expo vlog. It's a bummer, but it is what it is. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi. I have a lot of thoughts, I have a lot of comments. This does include both good and bad things about this year's AX. I don't even know how to go about this video, really. Okay, so first, the badges went out really well. I mean, okay, let's talk about badges first. If you ordered them in time to get them shipped, then that went really well. My badge, my mom's badge, my dad's badge, and my sister's badge all got here pretty quickly, in a pretty decent amount of time. Like the tap in, tap out, like there's not much to say about that. Like that was, again, well done. However, something I do want to mention before I get on to another thing that I just thought of. If you didn't, like, let's say you ordered your badge, which a lot of people did, after the deadline for being able to have your badges mailed out. Like, I'm not very active on Twitter, but from what I've seen in screenshots of Twitter posts, there were a lot of people waiting in line because their badges hadn't printed. That is just very unprofessional on the part of Anime Expo. They should have had enough badges printed to begin with. Like, given the last Anime Expo 2019 had around 100,000 people in attendance. They needed to have like close to double that printed already of the badges printed, because not having badges printed like on the actual weekend of Anime Expo, July 1st through 4th, not having people's badges printed is very unprofessional. And how long people had to wait in line was very unprofessional. Like, Anime Expo has become known as LineCon at this point, but which is like, the lines themselves aren't the problem. It was just the fact that a lot of people were in line because their badges hadn't been printed yet. That's inexcusable, because they should have had them printed like well in advance. You would think that Anime Expo would have enough badges printed, given how popular it's gotten. Like, day one of Anime Expo, on the drive over, I don't even remember what classical radio station we were listening to, but it was a classical radio station playing a classical version of a Legend of Zelda tune, and then the host at that time mentioned Anime Expo weekend, because that's what it was. So just the fact that Anime Expo has gotten so big to have a classical radio station playing a classical anime piece, or a classical version of an anime piece, and having the host of that classical station mentioning the expo, says a lot. So they needed to have enough badges. And like, again, with the classical radio station, that just goes to show how much money they spent on advertising for Anime Expo. Money that could have been spent on printing enough badges for people. And like, yeah, the 4-day badges like sold out, but they should have had that many badges already printed, if not more. Moving on to the COVID verification wristband, I thought that was like, I have mixed feelings about it, because it was annoying, and like that part, like the guy did it pretty tightly. It was comfortably, but it was on my wrist comfortably. Like, there was just enough space for me to like be comfortable in it. But like it just, because my wrists are small and like my hands are small, the rest of the wristband, like, that wasn't part of like the whole, that wasn't around my wrist, was like just sticking out like crazy, and that, like, I wanted to cut it, but I was afraid to, because I didn't want them to be like, oh, why'd you cut it, like, what did you do? So I thought it was really good that they had wristbands and were checking for wristbands, which gives me another thought, but I'm gonna talk about that later. I'll talk about it next. But I just feel like it should have been a situation where we could have taken the wristband off at night. I just wish it was like a sticker on the badge. I just found the wristband annoying because it's like, I'm not a big bracelet person to begin with. So like, and even though this was like a thin wristband, like the long thing, like as I mentioned, like it extended out maybe that far from my wrist, and that part was just annoying. So most of my interactions with staff were good. However, what I heard is that I'm not sure what entrance this was, but at one of the entrances, especially for the vendors, like the staff was taking food away from the vendors when you can bring food in. And those staff were telling the vendors you can't bring food in. And it was like, when you went to like the Anime Expo guidelines, you can bring food in for like individual consumption. You just can't have like food to hand around to like everyone. You can't have a bunch of food like you're doing like for a party or something. And the vendors were bringing food for individual use. It's not like they were bringing like truckloads of food or like bags of food. And it did end up being investigated when it was brought up on Twitter. I was talking to one of my friends, or a couple of my friends, and they were saying how it was only investigated when it was brought up on Twitter. But to play devil's advocate, that might have been the only way they were able to get Anime Expo's attention and like the upper echelons of like the workforce at Anime Expo. But what those staff members did was totally wrong, and I'm just hoping that those vendors were compensated and were given food, like free food, and compensated on top of that for the money that they spent on that food. But as I said, all of my interactions with staff were on the positive side. Something that I also kind of wish is like my sister and I, we were trying to head to our car day 3 yesterday. When I'm recording this, at least yesterday. Day 3, we were heading to our car to drop off some stuff and like coming back in, and we were going into the West Hall parking lot, and they have tap stations at every single entrance. If you're a recent Anime Expo goer, especially like 2019 and then this year, you know that you need to tap out. Like, you need to tap in when you're walking in, and you need to tap out when you exit. And I know for sure because on day 1, on day 2, I tapped out in the West Hall parking lot. Like, when you exit directly into the parking lot from the West Hall. I tapped out there before, on days 1 and 2. The security guard said that we don't have an exit tap out here, which, like, and I really tried to be sympathetic with these volunteers, like the security AX volunteers, like in general, because as I said, they're just trying to do their jobs. And maybe it was a situation where all of the tap stations were being used as entrances, since it was like the middle of the day. But like, my point is that at every entrance, at every possible place where people can come in to the LA Convention Center site, to Anime Expo, and go out and exit, there needs to be at least one exit tap out station so people can tap out. And like, this isn't like that specific security guard's fault or any of the security at that station, like, not their fault, but there needs to be at least one exit station in the middle of the day at every single entrance. Overall, Anime Expo was pretty well, like, it was weird because it was pretty well organized, but at the same time, there were quite a few aspects of it that were disorganized. Like, it makes no sense unless you were there this year, but like, it was pretty well organized in the sense that like, getting in and, well, for the most part, getting in and out was pretty well organized, and like, getting in and out of the building was pretty well organized. Getting like the verification wristband was pretty well organized. And if you had the Anime Expo app, that made a lot of things easier. But like there were like a lot of aspects that were sort of disorganized, like the not having an exit out tap station to the West Hall parking lot. Another thing that was very worrisome was that Anime Expo had a mandatory mask requirement. And on a slightly positive note, the Anime Expo app, if you had it, did send out notifications saying masks are required to be on at all times when indoors. But no one was enforcing it. None of the staff were enforcing it. None of the volunteers were enforcing it. You never heard anyone saying, please wear your masks. In the artist alley, you did have there were actually quite a few booths in the artist alley that said, no mask, no service, which was great. But the mandatory mask requirement was not mandatory because no one was enforcing it. And it's not like the Anime Expo app can actually enforce it. And like, I can, again, playing devil's advocate a little bit, I can understand where maybe the staff, the volunteers at AX weren't enforcing it because, you know, someone can put on you can put on a mask when someone says like put on a mask, and then once you're out of earshot and eyeshot of that person, you can just take it off and put it away. So it's just like, I can understand where they weren't if they weren't enforcing it because of that, but they should have been enforcing it because people have actual health issues and no one seems to be concerned about that. And COVID cases are starting to spike again, and they're going to spike, especially for a lot of the Anime Expo goers who weren't wearing masks. I do plan to go next year. My hope is that I'll go all 4 days next year, but after what happened this year, after getting so emotionally overwhelmed this year, I'm just gonna play it by ear next year and just see how things go. I am gonna try to buy my badge as soon as possible, as soon as the sale goes up. Thank you all for watching, and see you in next week's video.